The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. I remember because that was the day I always watered my orchids, the ones Richard had given me for our 45th anniversary before the cancer took him. 3 years he'd been gone, and I still talked to his photograph every morning. Another day, Richard, I'd say, touching the silver frame with fingertips that had grown more gnarled with each passing season. The apartment manager, a young man named Kyle, who always called me Mrs. Bennett, despite my repeated invitations to use Eleanor, couldn't look me in the eye when he handed me the envelope. Corporate decision? Mrs. Bennett, he mumbled, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. New owners bought the building. They're converting everything to luxury units. I'd lived in that 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street for 18 years. After Richard died, I'd considered moving somewhere smaller, but the thought of sorting through our life together, deciding what memories to keep and which to discard, had been too overwhelming. So I stayed, using his Social Security along with mine to make the $1,150 monthly rent, steep but manageable if I was careful. The notice gave me 60 days. 60 days to find somewhere new in Boston's impossible housing market. 60 days to pack up nearly 2 decades of life. 60 days to say goodbye to the home where Richard and I had retired, where we'd hosted our grandchildren during summer visits, where I'd held his hand as he'd taken his final breaths. They can't do this, I told Kyle, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. I've never been late with rent. It's not about that, Mrs. Bennett, he said, finally meeting my eyes with genuine regret. It's just business. They're offering everyone a $2,000 relocation fee if you're out within 30 days. $2,000. As if that would make a difference in a city where studio apartments now rented for nearly $3,000 a month. My modest pension and Social Security totaled just under $3,200 monthly. The math was impossible. That night I sat at my dining table, the same oak set Richard and I had purchased when we first married, and made a list of options. Rental assistance programs had years-long waiting lists. Senior housing developments were similarly backlogged. Friends my age were either in similar financial situations or had already moved to Florida or Arizona. My daughter Rebecca lived in Seattle with her wife and their adopted twins. They barely had room for themselves in their tiny condo. That left my son, Michael. Michael had done well for himself. Very well. After graduating from MIT, he joined a tech startup that had eventually been purchased by Google for an amount that had made my head spin. He and his wife, Vanessa, lived in a sprawling Victorian in Newton, just outside Boston. 5 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a beautifully landscaped yard where their 2 children, Aiden and Emma, ages 12 and 9, could play. We weren't close, Michael and I. Not estranged exactly, but distant in that way that happens when lives take different trajectories. I saw them at holidays, sometimes birthdays. He'd call every few weeks, brief conversations that felt like items checked off a to-do list. Vanessa had always been polite, but cool toward me, especially after her mother Gloria had moved in with them 3 years ago, following her own husband's death. But they had room, they had means, and I was running out of options. I called him the next morning. "Mom," he answered, sounding surprised. I rarely initiated calls. "Everything okay?" I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice from cracking when I mentioned having to leave the place where his father had spent his last days. "Jesus," he said, "that's awful. These developers are destroying the city." He paused. "Have you looked into senior communities? The waiting lists are years long." "Michael, and the market rate ones start at $4,000 a month." Another pause. I could hear him breathing, calculating. "Let me talk to Vanessa," he finally said. "We have the guest room in the basement. It could work, temporarily at least, until we figure something out." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you, Michael. I wouldn't ask if I had another option." "I know, Mom. Let me call you back tonight." He called back 3 days later. "Mom," he began, his voice carrying that formal tone he used when discussing business matters. "Vanessa and I talked it over. We can make this work." I closed my eyes, releasing the breath I felt I'd been holding for days. "Thank you, sweetheart. I promise I won't be a burden. I can help with the kids, cooking. There are some parameters we need to discuss," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "The basement guest room has its own bathroom and a small sitting area. It's private. You'd have your own entrance through the side door." "That sounds perfect," I said, though something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "We've worked out a monthly contribution that seems fair. $2,000 a month." I nearly dropped the phone. $2,000! It's well below market rate for the area. "Mom, and it includes utilities, internet, everything." I did the math quickly. After paying him, I'd have bang $200 left for food, medications, transportation, and everything else. "Michael, that's nearly 2/3 of my income." "It's a valuable property, Mom, and Newton taxes are brutal." His voice had taken on that slightly condescending tone he sometimes used, the one that reminded me of his father when Richard would explain why my household budget concerns were misguided. "We're also asking for a security deposit. First and last month's rent. Standard procedure." $4,000. Money I didn't have, not after paying this month's rent on the apartment. I don't have that kind of cash on hand, Michael." "You'll get a relocation payment, right? And Dad's watch collection is still in your safety deposit box." "Isn't it? Those vintage Rolexes are worth something." My hand tightened around the phone. Richard's watches were the only valuable things we'd ever owned. He'd collected them over decades, each one representing a milestone in his career. He'd left them to Michael in his will, but I hadn't been ready to part with them yet. Tangible connections to the man I'd shared my life with. "I was saving those for you, for when you were ready," I said softly. "And I appreciate that, Mom, but this seems like the right time. You need the cash, and they're just sitting in a box. Dad would understand." Would he? I wondered. Would Richard understand his son charging his elderly mother rent to live in his basement? "I need to think about this," I said. "Don't wait too long," Michael replied. "We need to make arrangements if this is happening." I hung up and looked around at the apartment, at the faded armchair where Richard used to read his mystery novels, at the gallery wall of family photos chronicling decades of birthdays and graduations and vacations. How do you pack up a life? I wondered. How do you assign value to memories? The next morning I went to the bank. I opened the safety deposit box and looked at Richard's collection. 12 watches in total, each in its original box with documentation. I selected 3. The Rolex Submariner he'd bought after his first big promotion. The Omega Speedmaster he'd worn on our 25th anniversary trip to Switzerland, and the vintage Patek Philippe his father had given him. The 3 most valuable according to the appraisal we'd had done after Richard died. A dealer in downtown Crossing offered me $26,500 for all 3. Less than they were worth, but a fair enough price for a quick cash transaction. I deposited the money, keeping out enough for the moving expenses I'd need. I called Michael that evening and told him I'd take the basement room. I didn't mention the watches. 2 weeks later, I stood outside their home in Newton, a modest suitcase in each hand. I'd donated most of my furniture to a shelter, sold some pieces to neighbors. The rest went into a small storage unit along with boxes of photo albums, Richard's books, and the mementos I couldn't bear to part with. Michael's house was exactly as I remembered it, a beautiful Victorian painted in historically accurate colors, with a wraparound porch and carefully tended gardens. The property had been featured in a local home magazine the previous year. "Modern family living in a classic space," the article had proclaimed, featuring glossy photos of Vanessa's impeccable interior design. I rang the doorbell, feeling strangely like a visitor rather than family. After a moment, the door swung open, revealing not Michael or Vanessa, but Gloria, Vanessa's mother. "Eleanor," she said, her tone suggesting I was exactly on time for a dental appointment no one was looking forward to. "Come in. Michael and Vanessa are picking up the children from their activities. They should be back soon." Gloria had never warmed to me in all the years our children had been married. At their wedding, she'd commented that my hat looked brave. When the grandchildren were born, she'd somehow always managed to be holding them in family photos, positioning herself centrally while I stood at the edges. Since moving in with Michael and Vanessa after her husband's death, she'd further cemented her position as family matriarch. She led me through the house, past the formal living room with its cream-colored furniture that always made me afraid to sit down, through the gourmet kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that Vanessa, who ordered takeout 4 nights a week, rarely used, to a door off the kitchen. "These stairs lead to your quarters," Gloria said, making it sound like I was being shown to servants' lodgings in a period drama. "There's a separate entrance from the side yard as well, but this gives you access to the kitchen. Vanessa has cleared a shelf in the refrigerator and a cabinet for your personal food items." I followed her down the carpeted stairs to what was essentially a finished basement. It was pleasant enough, a bedroom with a queen-sized bed, a small sitting area with a love seat and television, and a compact bathroom with a shower stall. There was even a small desk in the corner near a window well that let in a modest amount of natural light. "Thank you," I said, setting down my suitcases. "This will be fine." Gloria lingered, watching as I took in my new accommodations. "Vanessa has put together some house guidelines," she said, handing me a neatly typed page. "Nothing unreasonable, just expectations to ensure everyone's comfort." I scanned the document, my heart sinking with each bullet point. Kitchen use, limited to 9 just a.m., 11 a.m., and 2 sub p.m., 4 p.m. to avoid mealtime conflicts. Laundry room available Tuesdays and Fridays. 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. No overnight guests without 48-hour advance notice. Basement television volume to be kept low after 8 p.m. Please use side entrance when coming and going during evening hours, after 7 p.m. Monthly contribution due on the 1st of each month, cash or check. "Is there anything else?" I asked, folding the paper and slipping it into my purse. "Just one thing," Gloria said, her voice taking on a confidential tone. "I suggested to Vanessa that they should charge you market rate, but she felt family should receive a discount. Just so you know, I paid $2,500 for the 3rd-floor suite, which isn't much larger than this space." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Gloria had a comfortable teacher's pension on top of her late husband's considerable life insurance policy. She didn't need to sell precious memories to afford her contribution. "I'll let you get settled," she said, turning to leave. At the stairs, she paused. "Oh, and Eleanor? The children don't know you're in financial difficulties. Michael and Vanessa told them you were lonely in that big apartment by yourself. Better for everyone that way, don't you think?" She didn't wait for an answer. Alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. This wasn't how I'd imagined my golden years. Richard and I had planned carefully, saved diligently. But his illness had drained our reserves, and the rising cost of living had steadily eroded what remained. Now I was essentially a tenant in my own son's home, with strict rules about when I could use the kitchen and do my laundry. I reached into my purse and pulled out Richard's photograph, the one that had sat on my nightstand for decades. "Well, here we are," I whispered to his smiling image. "Not quite what we planned, is it?" I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking, arranging the few personal items I'd brought in an attempt to make the space feel like home. My books on the small bookshelf. Richard's chest set on the coffee table, the quilt my mother had made for our wedding on the foot of the bed. Around 6, I heard the commotion of the family returning home, doors slamming, children's voices, the beep of the alarm system being reset. I waited, expecting Michael or Vanessa to come down, to welcome me officially. But no one came. Finally, at nearly 7, there was a knock at the top of the stairs. "Grandma," it was Emma's voice. "Mom says dinner's ready if you want to come up." I made my way upstairs to find the family already seated around the large dining table. Michael nodded at me, his attention mostly on his phone. Vanessa offered a tight smile. "Grandma," Aiden said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Are you really living with us now? That's awesome." "Language, Aiden," Vanessa corrected automatically. "Sorry, that's very cool," he amended with an eye roll in my direction that made me suppress a smile. "Yes, I'm living downstairs now," I confirmed, taking the empty seat beside Emma. "Why?" Emma asked with a child's directness. Michael cleared his throat. "Like we discussed, Em, Grandma was lonely in that big apartment all by herself. This way she gets to see us more often." I caught Gloria's eye across the table. She gave me a small, satisfied nod. "Can you help me with my history project?" Aiden asked excitedly. "We're doing family histories, and Dad said you lived through, like, a lot of important stuff." "Aiden," Vanessa admonished, "Grandma isn't that old." "I'd love to help," I said quickly, ignoring the implication that at 65, I was practically ancient. I remember the moon landing Woodstock, though I didn't attend, and I marched for civil rights in college. Aiden's eyes widened. "That's so cool! Way better than Brooke Mitchell's grandmother. She just talked about how expensive candy bars used to be." Dinner proceeded with the children chattering about school and activities, Michael occasionally interjecting comments about work, and Vanessa directing the conversation like an orchestra conductor, ensuring no topic lingered too long. Gloria commented frequently on the children's table manners and nutritional choices, clearly comfortable in her role as senior advisor to the household. I said little, observing the family dynamics. This was their rhythm, established long before I arrived. I was the newcomer, the disruption to their pattern. After dinner, as I rose to help clear the table, Vanessa stopped me. "That's not necessary, Eleanor. We have a system." Her tone was polite but dismissive. The children clear, Michael loads the dishwasher, and I put away the leftovers. It teaches responsibility. "Of course," I said, relinquishing the plates I'd gathered. "I'll just head back downstairs then. Thank you for dinner." No one protested. In the days that followed, I established my own routine. Up early, a habit from decades of teaching elementary school, I would make a cup of tea and read the news on the small tablet I'd purchased with some of the watch money. At 9, when my kitchen access began, I'd prepare a light breakfast and pack a lunch to eat later, storing everything in the small dormitory refrigerator Michael had installed in my room. Mostly I stayed out of the way. I took the bus to the library, where I volunteered reading to children 2 mornings a week. I joined a senior center where I could participate in exercise classes and art workshops for a modest fee. I walked through Newton's beautiful neighborhoods when the weather permitted, sometimes stopping at a cafe for a cup of tea, a small luxury I budgeted for carefully. The first month passed in this manner, with minimal interaction with the family upstairs. I saw the children occasionally, helping Emma practice her spelling words or listening to Aiden explain the intricacies of a video game I couldn't begin to comprehend. Michael was frequently traveling for work. Vanessa was consumed with her interior design clients and the children's packed schedules of sports and enrichment activities. And then there was Gloria. Gloria, who seemed to materialize whenever I used the kitchen, commenting on my interesting food choices. Gloria, who accidentally rescheduled her hair appointment for the exact time I had planned to do laundry. Gloria, who mentioned at every opportunity how grateful I must be for Michael and Vanessa's generosity. It was Gloria who knocked on my door one morning in late October, nearly 6 weeks after I'd moved in. "Eleanor," she said, not waiting for an invitation to enter. "I wanted to discuss Thanksgiving." "What about it?" I asked, marking my place in the book I'd been reading. "Well, as you know, I've hosted Thanksgiving dinner here for the past 3 years. My stuffing recipe is somewhat of a family tradition at this point." What Gloria meant was that she had taken over Thanksgiving after Richard died, supplanting the traditions he and I had established over 4 decades of marriage. Her stuffing recipe was nearly identical to mine, with the addition of dried cranberries, a touch she mentioned at every opportunity as her special twist. "I'm sure dinner will be lovely," I said noncommittally. "The thing is," Gloria continued, perching on the edge of my love seat uninvited, "space at the table is becoming an issue. Vanessa's brother is coming with his new wife, and Michael's college roommate and his family always join us. That's already 12 people." I waited, seeing where this was heading. "We thought perhaps you might prefer to have dinner with your friends from that senior center you've been visiting. Vanessa would be happy to contribute to a restaurant meal. Somewhere nice." She smiled beneficently. I felt something shift inside me, a small crack in the careful politeness I'd maintained. "I don't have plans with friends, Gloria. This is my son's home. My grandchildren are here. Where else would I be for Thanksgiving?" Her smile tightened. "It was just a thought, Eleanor. No need to be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm stating a fact. This is my family." "Of course it is," she said, standing. "I'll let Vanessa know you'll be joining us. Perhaps you could contribute a pie? Something simple that could be prepared ahead? The kitchen will be quite busy that day." She left before I could respond, the click of her heels on the stairs punctuating her retreat. That evening there was a knock at my door. Michael stood there looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Mom, got a minute?" I gestured him in, noting how he hesitated at the threshold as if entering foreign territory. He'd been down exactly twice since I moved in. Once to set up the mini fridge, and once to fix a flickering light in the bathroom. "Everything okay?" I asked, offering him the desk chair while I sat on the love seat. "Sure, yeah." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Just wanted to check in, see how you're settling in." "I'm fine." "Michael, thank you for asking." He nodded, glancing around the room. "Good, good. Listen, about Thanksgiving." "Gloria mentioned there might be space concerns," I said, saving him the awkwardness. "It's not that exactly," he said, though his relief at not having to broach the subject himself was palpable. "It's just that the dinner has grown into this whole production. Vanessa spends weeks planning. Gloria has her traditions. It's a bit overwhelming. And you're concerned my presence might complicate things." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." "Doesn't it?" I agreed mildly. Michael sighed. "Mom, you know how Vanessa gets about these things. And with her brother coming from Chicago with the new wife, everyone's supposed to make nice with, despite the fact he left his first wife in a pretty shabby way." He trailed off. "It's politics. Family politics. And where exactly do I fit in those politics?" "Michael?" He didn't answer directly. "We thought maybe you'd be more comfortable with a smaller gathering. The country club is doing a Thanksgiving buffet. Really nice. We'd cover it, of course. You could take a friend." "A friend," I repeated. "And which friend did you imagine I'd take?" "Mrs. Peterson from 4B. She's in Florida now. Or perhaps Mrs. Goldstein from 2A. She's in assisted living in Brookline. Or maybe one of my teaching colleagues. Most are scattered across the country or dealing with their own family obligations." Michael looked pained. "Mom?" "No, Michael, let me finish. When your father died, I lost not just my husband, but my best friend, my daily companion, my partner in navigating the world. At our age, friends move away to be near their children. They go into care facilities. They die." My voice caught, but I pressed on. "I have acquaintances at the senior center. Pleasant people I chat with about books or current events. But friends I could spend a holiday with. No. Those connections take time to build, and I haven't had that time yet." He had the decency to look abashed. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, because you didn't ask. I took a deep breath. I understand your concern about space and Vanessa's stress level. So here's what I propose. I'll join you for the meal itself. Before and after, I'll make myself scarce. I'll even prepare my part of the meal down here, using the microwave and mini fridge if necessary. All I ask is to sit at the table with my family on Thanksgiving Day. Michael nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. I'll talk to Vanessa. Thank you. I paused, then added, and Michael, please don't offer to pay for me to eat alone at the country club again. I'd rather have a sandwich down here by myself than accept that particular charity. He flinched at the word charity, but nodded again. Message received. I'm sorry, Mom. After he left, I sat for a long time staring at Richard's photograph. This isn't right, I whispered to his image. None of this is right. The week before Thanksgiving, I received a call from Mrs. Abernathy, my former next-door neighbor from the apartment building. Eleanor, dear, I have the strangest news, she said without preamble. A young man came by asking questions about you. Said he was conducting a routine check for building security, wanting to know if there had been any issues with tenants. But he seemed particularly interested in you, how long you'd lived there, if you'd ever caused problems. That sort of thing. A chill ran through me. Did he give a name? Anderson, I think, or Anderson with an E. He had identification, but I didn't look closely. My eyes, you know. What did you tell him? Only good things, dear. That you were the perfect neighbor for 18 years. That you cared for your husband through his illness without complaint. That the building would be poorer without you. Thank you, Margaret. That was kind. There's something else, she continued. I ran into Kyle in the lobby yesterday. He mentioned the new owners might be reconsidering the conversion of the East Wing, where your apartment was, due to some zoning complication. He seemed to think some tenants might be offered the chance to return under new leases. My heart skipped a beat. Return? At what rent? He didn't say specifically, but he mentioned they were thinking of keeping some units at moderate rates to comply with the city's affordable housing requirements. Apparently, there's been quite a fuss from the tenants' rights groups about the evictions. After we hung up, I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. If, and it was a significant if, I could return to my old building at a rent I could afford, it would mean freedom from this basement arrangement. No more structured kitchen access. No more feeling like an unwelcome house guest in my son's home. But there was the matter of money. I'd spent nearly all the watch money on the security deposit for Michael, moving expenses, and setting up my new life here. If an opportunity to return to Maple Street arose, I would need funds for a security deposit, moving costs, perhaps even new furniture since I'd disposed of so much. I thought of the remaining watches in the safety deposit box. They'd fetch a good price, enough to fund a return to independence. But something held me back, not just sentimentality, though that was part of it. There was a principle at stake. Those watches had been Richard's legacy to his son. I'd already sold 3 out of necessity. Selling the rest felt like erasing the last tangible connection between father and son. I needed to know more before making any decisions. The next morning, I took the bus to my old neighborhood. The building looked the same from the outside, though a fancy new sign had been erected announcing the residences at Maple Place, luxury living in historic Boston. I hesitated at the entrance, no longer having a key fob for access, but luck was with me. A young woman was exiting, and she held the door with a smile. In the lobby, I found Kyle at the concierge desk, looking slightly more polished than I remembered in a new uniform with the property's logo. "Mrs. Bennett," he exclaimed, genuine pleasure in his voice. "What a nice surprise. How are you settling in, wherever it is you moved to?" "Newton," I said. "With my son. It's been an adjustment." He nodded sympathetically. "I bet. Listen, I'm glad you stopped by. There's been some news about the building that might interest you. Oh? I tried to sound only mildly curious. The conversion is still happening, but they're keeping about 20% of the units at what they're calling workforce rates. Basically, moderately priced rentals for people who meet certain income criteria. Existing tenants who were in good standing get first option. My pulse quickened. What sort of rates are we talking about? He glanced around, then lowered his voice. For your old 2-bedroom, probably around $2,200. A bump from what you were paying, but nowhere near the $300 to $800 they're asking for the luxury units. $2,200. Still a stretch on my fixed income, but potentially manageable if I was careful. And being back in my own space, on my own terms, that was worth a lot. When would these units be available? I asked. February, they're saying. The renovations to the common areas will be done by then, though they're doing minimal updates to the workforce units. He paused. There's one thing, Mrs. Bennett. There's been a rather aggressive screening process for returning tenants. Someone's been asking around about everyone who's applied to come back. Margaret's call about the mysterious Mr. Anderson suddenly made more sense. What kind of screening? Background checks, financials, even interviewing former neighbors. It's unusual for a residential building, honestly. More like what you'd expect for a high-security facility. And who's conducting these screenings? Kyle shrugged. Some firm hired by the management company. Why do you ask? Just curious, I said lightly. Hey. Would my name be on the list of potential returning tenants? It should be. All former residents in good standing were automatically added to the consideration pool. Would you want me to check for you specifically? If you wouldn't mind, I said. And Kyle? I'd appreciate if you kept my visit between us. He winked conspiratorially. Absolutely, Mrs. Bennett. As I left the building, my mind was racing. The prospect of returning to independent living was tantalizing, but the mysterious screening process concerned me. Who was this Anderson person, and why the intensive background checks for a residential building? I decided to make one more stop before heading back to Newton. The bus took me downtown to the offices of Boston Housing Justice, a tenants' rights organization I'd read about in articles concerning evictions like mine. Perhaps they could shed some light on what was happening at Maple Street. The office was small but busy, with posters about tenant rights covering the walls and a reception area full of people filling out forms. I approached the front desk, where a young man with dreadlocks and kind eyes greeted me. Welcome to BHJ. How can I help you today? I explained my situation, the eviction, my current living arrangement, and the new information about possibly returning to my building. Maple Street, he repeated, recognition dawning. Oh yeah, we know that property well. That's one of the Cartwright Group's acquisitions. They've got a pattern of mass evictions followed by voluntary affordable unit designations that let them skirt the legal requirements while looking like good corporate citizens. Cartwright Group? The name sounded vaguely familiar. He tapped at his computer. Yep, Cartwright Residential Holdings. They're a subsidiary of Cartwright Enterprises. He looked up at me. Why? Does that name mean something to you? It did, but I couldn't place it. Maybe, I'm not sure. He called over a colleague, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor who introduced herself as Diane Winters, a housing attorney. I repeated my story to her. The aggressive screening is concerning, she said when I mentioned Anderson's inquiries. It suggests they're looking for reasons to deny certain applicants. Have you formally applied to return? Not yet. I just learned it might be a possibility. She nodded thoughtfully. If you do apply, and if you're rejected for questionable reasons, we might have grounds for a discrimination case, especially given your age. Would you be willing to document the process if you proceed? Yes, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. Yes, I would. She handed me her card. Call me if you decide to move forward. And Mrs. Bennett, be careful. These companies can play hardball. On the bus ride back to Newton, I turned over the name Cartwright in my mind, certain I'd heard it before. It wasn't until I was walking the last block to Michael's house that it clicked. Cartwright Enterprises was one of Vanessa's clients. She'd designed their corporate headquarters in Cambridge the previous year, a project she'd spoken about at length during one of our holiday gatherings. The commission had been substantial, launching her firm into a new echelon of commercial clients. A coincidence? Perhaps. Boston was a small, big city, after all. But the aggressive tenant screening coming on the heels of my eviction and relocation to Michael's house now took on a more troubling dimension. That evening at dinner, I casually brought up my old building. "I ran into my former neighbor today," I said, accepting the salad bowl from Aidan. She mentioned there might be some affordable units opening up at Maple Street in the spring. Vanessa's hand paused momentarily as she served potatoes. Michael's eyes flickered to her, then back to his plate. But it was Gloria who spoke. "Moving again so soon? After all the trouble Michael and Vanessa went through to set up that lovely space downstairs? That seems rather ungrateful, Eleanor." "It was just a passing comment," I said mildly, "though I do miss my independence." "Independence is overrated at our age," Gloria pronounced. "Being with family is much safer. Right, Vanessa?" Vanessa nodded, but her smile seemed strained. "Of course. And we love having you here, Eleanor. Don't we, Michael?" Michael cleared his throat. "Absolutely. But Mom's always been independent, if that's what she wants." "We'll discuss it later," Vanessa said with finality, effectively ending the conversation, but the seed had been planted. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to Michael and Vanessa's interactions. There were hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Phone calls Vanessa took in the backyard, away from the house, and once I overheard Michael asking, "Are you sure this is ethical?" before he noticed me at the kitchen doorway and abruptly changed the subject. Something wasn't right, and I intended to find out what it was. I began my investigation with the most direct source, Kyle from my former building. I called the management office from the public library, where my conversation wouldn't be overheard. "Kyle, it's Eleanor Bennett. I was wondering if you had a chance to check on my status for the returning tenant list." "I was going to call you today, actually," he said, his voice lowered. "Something strange is going on, Mrs. Bennett. Your name was on the list initially, but it's been flagged now." "Flagged? What does that mean?" "It means you're under special review. I can't access the details. They're restricted to upper management. But I've never seen this kind of flag before." "Who would have the authority to place such a flag?" He hesitated. "It would have to come from pretty high up. The property manager or above." "Could it be someone from Cartwright directly?" Another hesitation. "Possibly. They do take an unusually hands-on approach with tenant selection. Listen, Mrs. Bennett, I shouldn't be telling you this, but something doesn't feel right about the whole situation. If you're serious about coming back, you might want to talk to someone with more influence than me." After thanking Kyle, I called Diane Winters at Boston Housing Justice. Her reaction was immediate. "This confirms our suspicions about Cartwright's practices," she said. "They're cherry-picking who gets to return, likely based on criteria that wouldn't hold up to legal scrutiny. Would you be willing to file a formal complaint? It could help not just your case, but others in similar situations." "I need more information first," I told her. "I have a personal connection that might provide insight." That connection was my grandson, Aidan. At 12, he was perceptive and chatty, particularly when it came to his parents' work, which he found endlessly fascinating. That afternoon, when he came downstairs to show me his history project, now completed with my input about the civil rights movement, I steered the conversation toward his mother's design work. "Your mom mentioned she had a big client last year," I said casually. "Was it Cartwright something?" Aidan nodded enthusiastically. Cartwright Enterprises. It was a huge deal. Mom got to redo their whole headquarters, and now they want her to do all their properties. Dad says it could set us up for years. All their properties, like apartment buildings too? I think so. Mom has all these mood boards for different buildings. She was working on one called Maple something last month. She got all weird when I asked about it, though, said it was confidential. My heart skipped a beat. Maple Street. Vanessa was designing for Cartwright, including my former building. The connection was direct, not coincidental. Do you remember anything else about it? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Aiden thought for a moment. Just that Mom and Dad argued about it. Dad said something like, we shouldn't be involving family in business deals. Mom said it was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. I needed proof, something concrete. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I crept upstairs to Vanessa's home office. It was a risk. The house rules explicitly stated that the second floor was off limits unless invited, but necessary. The door was locked, but the old Victorian had the original skeleton key locks. I'd noticed earlier that the key to my bathroom door was nearly identical to the others in the house. I tried it, and with a bit of jiggling, the lock turned. Inside, Vanessa's office was immaculate with a large drafting table, a sleek computer setup, and walls covered in design samples and project boards. I went straight to the filing cabinet, quickly locating a drawer labeled Cartwright. The first folder I pulled out confirmed my suspicions. Maple Street conversion. Inside were design plans for the building, including my old unit, now designated as a premium luxury residence with a complete reconfiguration. But what caught my eye was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the floor plan. Ensure EB does not return. Client priority. EB Eleanor Bennett. Me. I photographed the note with my phone, along with several other documents showing Vanessa's involvement with the property. As I was replacing the folder, I noticed another labeled simply EB agreement. Inside was a contract between Cartwright, Residential Holdings, and something called Bennett Family Trust, with Michael listed as trustee. The agreement outlined a consulting arrangement whereby the Bennett Family Trust would receive a $50,000 payment plus an ongoing 2% commission on all leases signed at the Maple Street property, in exchange for strategic tenant transition services. I felt physically ill. My own son had been paid to ensure I would be permanently removed from my home, clearing the way for Cartwright's luxury conversion. The aggressive screening was simply a means to prevent me from returning and potentially discovering their arrangement. I photographed the entire agreement, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. As I was returning the folder to its place, I heard a noise in the hallway. Quickly, I closed the drawer, turned off the small desk lamp I'd been using, and slipped behind the door just as it opened. "Hello?" Gloria's voice. "Is someone in here?" I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall. After what seemed an eternity, she closed the door again. I waited several minutes before daring to move, then carefully made my way back to my basement room, the evidence safely stored in my phone. Sleep eluded me that night as I wrestled with what I'd discovered. My son, Richard's son, had essentially sold me out for $50,000 and an ongoing commission. He'd known about the eviction before it happened. He'd facilitated it. And then he'd charged me $2,000 a month to live in his basement, extracting even more profit from my displacement. By morning, my shock had hardened into resolve. I forwarded the photos to Diane Winters with a brief explanation, then made 2 more calls. One to my bank regarding the remaining watches, and another to a realtor I'd noticed handling properties in my old neighborhood. At breakfast, I announced my plans. "I've decided to move back to the city," I said calmly, buttering a piece of toast. I found a small 1-bedroom on Marlborough Street, It's a third-floor walk-up, but the exercise will be good for me. Michael choked on his coffee. What? When did this happen? I've been looking for a while. I lied smoothly. The opportunity just presented itself. I'll be moving next week. But Grandma, Emma protested. You just got here, and you promised to help with my science fair project. And I will, sweetheart. I'm not moving to the moon, just back to the city. You can visit any time. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. This seems very sudden, Eleanor. Are you sure it's wise? Marlborough Street is expensive. I've managed my finances, I said. The rent is $2,800, which is steep. But I've decided to sell Richard's remaining watches. They should fetch enough to cover the security deposit and give me a small cushion. Michael paled. Mom, those watches were left to you, yes? And they'll still be yours eventually. But right now, I need the funds more than you need the watches. Wouldn't you agree? The double meaning wasn't lost on him. His eyes dropped to his plate. What about Thanksgiving? Gloria asked. It's just days away. I'll still join you, if the invitation stands, as a guest, not a resident. The week that followed was tense. Michael made several attempts to dissuade me, each more transparent than the last. The market is terrible right now, Mom. Why not wait until spring? That neighborhood has seen an uptick in crime. I read an article just last week. Have you considered the stairs might become difficult as you age? I deflected each concern with practiced politeness, never revealing what I knew. Let him believe this was simply about independence. The confrontation could wait until I was safely re-established. The morning before Thanksgiving, a moving company arrived, paid for by Boston Housing Justice as part of their documentation of my case, to transport my few belongings to the Marlborough Street apartment. It wasn't a long-term solution, but it was a safe landing spot while the legal process unfolded. As the movers worked, Michael cornered me in the basement room. Mom, please reconsider. This is happening too fast. I looked at my son, Richard's son, searching his face for signs of the boy we'd raised. The boy who'd cried when his pet goldfish died, who'd insisted on giving his allowance to a homeless man outside the grocery store, who'd stayed up all night with his father when Richard had a particularly bad reaction to chemotherapy, reading aloud from his dad's favorite mystery novels until dawn broke. Michael, I said quietly, I know about Cartwright. I know about the agreement. I know you were paid to ensure I wouldn't return to Maple Street. The color drained from his face. How? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you betrayed me, your own mother, for money. It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. Vanessa's relationship with Cartwright is important for her business. They made it clear that resolving the tenant situation at Maple Street was a condition for continued contracts. When they realized you were my mother, it became complicated. So you simplified it by accepting payment to displace me, by charging me $2,000 to live in your basement after you helped evict me from my home. He had the grace to look ashamed. The money was Vanessa's idea. She said if we were taking on the burden. Burden, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Is that what I am to you? A burden? No, I didn't mean... He ran a hand through his hair. That gesture so like his father's. Mom, you have to understand, with the kids' private school tuition, the mortgage on this place, Vanessa's business loans, we're stretched thin. The Cartwright contract was a lifeline. And my lifeline, my home, my dignity, what were those worth, Michael? He had no answer. Your father would be heartbroken, I said softly. Michael flinched as if I'd slapped him. Don't bring Dad into this. Why not? He's central to all of it. The watches you suggested I sell to pay you rent. The values he thought he'd instilled in you. The promises you made to him about looking after me. I did look after you. I gave you a place to live. No, Michael. You profited from my misfortune. There's a difference. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. I think it's better for everyone if we take some time apart while I decide what to do with the information I have." "What information?" "What are you going to do?" Alarm crept into his voice. "I haven't decided yet. Boston Housing Justice is very interested in Cartwright's practices, and I imagine the state licensing board might have questions about an interior designer being involved in tenant displacement schemes." "You wouldn't." "That would destroy Vanessa's career." "Probably," I agreed, "just like you destroyed my home." The movers called down that they were finished. I picked up my purse and Richard's photograph, the last items to go. "I loved you enough to sell your father's watches to keep a roof over my head, Michael. Remember that when you're deciding who the villain is in this story." I left him standing in the basement room surrounded by the empty shelves and bare walls that had briefly been my home. The Marlborough Street apartment was small but charming, with worn hardwood floors and tall windows that let in abundant light. The building was older, without an elevator, but the third-floor location offered lovely views of the street's iconic brownstones. The rent was indeed steep, but manageable with careful budgeting, especially once the legal proceedings with Cartwright were resolved. Diane Winters had been beside herself when she saw the evidence I'd gathered. "This is a slam-dunk case, Mrs. Bennett," she'd exclaimed. "Not just for you, but potentially for dozens of other tenants who were improperly evicted. Cartwright has been buying buildings all over the city and pulling the same maneuver." "And my son's involvement?" She'd hesitated. "That complicates things personally." "I understand, but legally it strengthens our case. It shows a pattern of deliberate action to target specific tenants." I'd asked for time to consider my options. Pursuing the case might bring justice and financial compensation, but it would also irrevocably damage my relationship with Michael and, by extension, my grandchildren. Was that a price I was willing to pay? Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. I spent the morning arranging my new space, trying not to think about the family gathering I'd chosen to skip. Around noon, my phone rang. Michael. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for another confrontation. A text followed. "Mom, please call me. The kids are asking where you are." I turned the phone face down and continued unpacking. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. Looking through the peephole, I was shocked to see Aidan and Emma standing in the hallway, accompanied by a woman I recognized as Michael's longtime assistant. Jennifer. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" "Dad said you weren't coming for Thanksgiving because you were busy moving," Emma said, giving me a skeptical look that suggested she hadn't believed this explanation for a second. "So we brought Thanksgiving to you." Jennifer smiled apologetically. "They were very insistent, Mrs. Bennett. Michael asked me to drive them." "He didn't come himself?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "He and Mom are having a big fight," Aidan informed me matter-of-factly. "About money and Grandma Gloria saying mean things and some company called Cartwright." My eyes met Jennifer's over the children's heads. She gave a small nod, confirming Aidan's assessment. "Well, come in," I said, stepping aside. "Though I'm afraid I don't have much of a Thanksgiving meal prepared." "That's okay," Emma said, holding up a canvas bag. "We brought food. I made the rolls myself." "And I smuggled out some of Gloria's stuffing," Aidan added with a mischievous grin. "Though it's not as good as the kind you used to make." The four of us sat around my small bistro table, eating lukewarm turkey and sides from aluminum containers. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I'd envisioned, but as I watched my grandchildren chattering excitedly about their new projects and adventures, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. These children, these bright, kind souls, were Richard's legacy too. Whatever their parents had done, Aidan and Emma were innocent, and they had sought me out, insisted on including me in their holiday. After we'd eaten, Jennifer discreetly stepped outside to take a call, leaving me alone with the children. "Grandma," Emma said seriously, "are you mad at Dad? Is that why you moved out so fast? I chose my words carefully. Your dad and I have some disagreements to work through, adult things. About the Cartwright deal? Aiden asked shrewdly. I heard Mom say they paid Dad a lot of money to help them with the old people in some building. I winced internally at old people, but focused on the more important part of his statement. What else did you hear? That Dad wasn't comfortable with it, but Mom said they needed the money for our school and stuff, Emma chimed in. And then Grandma Gloria said something mean about you being a... She stopped, looking uncomfortable. A financial burden, Aiden finished. And Dad got really mad and said that wasn't true, and that's when they sent us to our rooms. But we could still hear them fighting. So Michael had defended me, at least on that point. It was something. A small ember of the sun I remembered, not entirely extinguished by greed or Vanessa's influence. Jennifer returned, apologetic. That was Michael. He's wondering where the children are. I think I should get them back soon. I nodded, giving each grandchild a tight hug. Thank you for coming. It meant the world to me. Can we visit again? Emma asked anxiously. Even though you don't live with us anymore? Of course you can, sweetheart. Anytime. After they left, I sat in my new living room, watching the early darkness of late November descend on the street below. My phone buzzed with another text from Michael. The kids said they visited. We need to talk. Not just about them, about everything. Can I come by tomorrow? I thought long and hard before responding. Despite everything, he was still my son, still Richard's son. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a path forward that didn't require complete estrangement. Yes, I texted back. Come at 10. The next morning, Michael arrived precisely on time, looking like he hadn't slept much. He held a manila envelope and a small wrapped package. Hi, Mom, he said tentatively. Nice place. Thank you. Would you like some coffee? He nodded, following me to the tiny kitchen where I poured 2 cups from the pot I'd prepared earlier. We sat at the bistro table, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, Michael pushed the envelope toward me. This is the money, all of it. The $50,000 from Cartwright, plus the $12,000 you paid in a rent. I've also included a formal letter severing our relationship with Cartwright Enterprises and acknowledging our wrongdoing. I stared at the envelope, surprised. Vanessa agreed to this? A shadow crossed his face. Vanessa and I are taking some time apart. She's staying at her mother's for a while. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked, not unkindly. Despite everything, I never wanted your marriage to suffer, Michael. He sighed deeply. It's been suffering for a while. The Cartwright situation just brought things to a head. I let myself be convinced that compromising my ethics was acceptable if it was for the family's benefit. But the person I hurt was family too, the most important family, my mother. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. What happens now? That's partly up to you, he said. I understand there's a legal case being built against Cartwright. Jennifer did some research after she brought the kids yesterday. Boston Housing Justice has been gathering evidence for months. Your situation could be the linchpin. You know that pursuing this would likely expose your involvement. He nodded. I know, and I'll accept whatever consequences come from that. It's the right thing to do. He pushed the small, wrapped package toward me. This is also yours. I unwrapped it to find a familiar velvet box containing Richard's favorite watch, the vintage Patek Philippe I'd sold to pay the security deposit at Michael's house. How did you... I tracked down the dealer you sold it to, paid a premium to get it back. He swallowed hard. Dad wanted me to have his watches, yes, but he also wanted me to take care of you. I failed at the more important trust. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I cradled the watch. Thank you, Michael. There's one more thing, he said. reaching into his pocket and pulling out a key. "This is to the house. Your old room upstairs, not the basement. If you ever want to come back, even just for visits with the kids, it's yours. No rent, no rules, just family." I accepted the key, though I knew I wouldn't be returning to live in that house. Too much had happened. But visits with the grandchildren, that was another matter. "I'd like that," I said. "The children shouldn't suffer for adult mistakes." Michael nodded, visibly relieved. "And Mom? Whatever you decide about the legal case, I'll support you. I'll testify if needed. It's time I started doing the right thing, no matter how hard it is." In that moment I saw Richard in him again, not just in the familiar gesture of running his hand through his hair, but in the moral backbone that had finally, belatedly, reasserted itself. "Your father would be proud of this moment," I said softly. "Not of what came before, but of you finding your way back to who he raised you to be." 3 months later, I stood on the steps of Boston City Hall, flanked by Diane Winters and several other former tenants from Maple Street. The press conference was announcing a settlement with Cartwright Enterprises, a substantial one that included financial compensation for displaced residents, guaranteed affordable units in all their properties, and a commitment to ethical housing practices moving forward. Michael had indeed testified, detailing the company's deliberate targeting of vulnerable tenants and their tactics to prevent returns. His cooperation, combined with the documentary evidence I'd provided, had been instrumental in securing the settlement. The professional consequences for him had been significant. Some business associates had distanced themselves, but others had respected his willingness to make amends. His marriage to Vanessa had not survived. She'd been unwilling to accept responsibility for her role in the scheme, and after a tense few months, they'd begun divorce proceedings. Gloria had, predictably, sided entirely with her daughter, casting me as the villain who had destroyed a happy family for financial gain. But Michael and the children had remained in my life. Aiden and Emma spent 1 weekend a month at my new apartment, a larger 2-bedroom on Commonwealth Avenue, afforded by the settlement. Michael and I had weekly dinners, slowly rebuilding trust through honest conversations and genuine efforts to understand each other's perspectives. As the press conference concluded and reporters dispersed, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the crowd, Kyle, the former manager from Maple Street. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, approaching with a smile. "Congratulations on the settlement. You did it." "We did it," I corrected. "Your information was crucial. Are you still with the property?" He shook his head. "No, I left after all this started coming to light. Too much ethical murkiness. But I landed on my feet, assistant property manager at a non-profit senior housing development in Jamaica Plain." "That sounds perfect for you, Kyle." "It is. Actually, we have some units coming available soon. Affordable, comfortable, good community. Would you be interested?" The settlement money could go a lot further there than on Commonwealth Avenue. I considered the offer. "Maybe. Send me the information?" As Kyle walked away, I felt a presence beside me. Michael, who had waited discreetly during the press conference, now stood at my shoulder. "Ready to go, Mom? The kids are waiting at the restaurant. They want to hear all about their Crusader grandmother." I smiled, linking my arm through his. "Let's not go overboard. I just wanted my home back." "And you got so much more," he observed. "Justice, vindication, change for others in similar situations." "I got my son back too," I said quietly. "That's worth more than any settlement." As we walked toward the restaurant, I thought about Richard, about what he would make of all this if he could see us now. The betrayal would have devastated him, but the redemption, the reconciliation, that would have given him hope. "You know," Michael said as we walked, "I was thinking about what you said that day in your apartment, about Dad being proud of me finding my way back to who he raised me to be. I meant it. I know. And it made me realize something. Dad always said integrity isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do after you make them. I squeezed his arm, my heart full. He was a wise man, your father. He married a wise woman. Ahead I could see Aiden and Emma waiting outside the restaurant, waving excitedly as they spotted us. Whatever came next, whether I stayed in my Commonwealth Avenue apartment or moved to Kyle's senior community or even, someday, took Michael up on his offer of a proper room in his house, I knew I had regained what mattered most: my dignity, my independence, and my family, reconstructed on more honest foundations. Yes, I said, waving back at my grandchildren. He certainly did. If you like this story, please like this video, please. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left